My name is Lillian Harper. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, I've been known as the other daughter. Not the difficult one, not the rebellious one, just the one who existed quietly beside someone shinier. Growing up in the Harper family meant growing up in my sister Evelyn's shadow. She was 3 years older than me, tall where I was small, confident where I hesitated, effortlessly beautiful in a way people noticed the moment she entered a room. Teachers adored her. Relatives bragged about her. My parents, Mary Ann and Robert Harper, spoke about her like she was proof they'd done something right. I was tolerated. It wasn't said outright. It never had to be. Favoritism rarely announces itself. It shows up in patterns, in tone, in who gets interrupted and who doesn't. When Evelyn turned 16, she got a brand new silver sedan with a bow on the hood and a driveway full of neighbors applauding. When I turned 16, my father handed me a pamphlet about responsibility and told me maybe next year. Evelyn received a full ride to a prestigious private university out of state. My parents hosted a celebratory dinner. Toasts were made, photos framed. I worked 2 part-time jobs to afford community college and was told it was good for my character. That phrase followed me everywhere. When Evelyn announced she was engaged to her college sweetheart, Mark Lawson, my mother burst into tears and immediately started a wedding planning binder. Deposits were paid before questions were asked. Venues were toured. Pinterest boards multiplied. When I mentioned I was seeing someone seriously, my mother smiled thinly and said, "Focus on building yourself first, sweetheart. Relationships can wait." It took me years to realize that in my family, I was always something unfinished. Then I met Daniel Reyes. Daniel was a physical therapist at a children's rehabilitation center. Calm, patient, and unshakably kind. He listened without waiting for his turn to speak. He never tried to fix me. He just saw me. We fell into love without fireworks. No grand declarations, just consistency, safety, laughter that felt like breathing. After a 1.5 years together, Daniel took me on a quiet weekend trip to the hill country. No crowd, no spectacle, just the 2 of us, sitting on a porch, watching the sun drop behind the trees. When he proposed, it wasn't flashy. His voice shook. His hands were warm. He asked me if I wanted to build a life together, not a performance. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Calling my parents afterward felt like a formality. I expected something small, polite, maybe restrained. What I got was worse. "Oh," my mother said after I shared the news. "That's nice." Nice, like a haircut. Or a casserole. My father cleared his throat. "Maybe you should wait until after Evelyn's wedding. You know how sensitive these things can be." Sensitive. Evelyn's wedding was still 8 months away. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. Like a door quietly closing. The months that followed were exhausting. Every family gathering revolved around Evelyn's wedding. My mother showed me floral samples, seating charts, fabric swatches. She expected my enthusiasm, my labor, my time. When I tried to mention my own engagement, the room always found a way to move on. At Evelyn's bridal shower, I was given tasks, not opinions. Address envelopes, pick up decorations, smile. When an aunt asked me when Daniel and I were getting married, my mother interrupted before I could answer. "Oh, Lillian isn't ready yet," she said lightly. "She's still figuring herself out." Evelyn smiled, said nothing. That silence hurt more than cruelty would have. That night I went home and cried into Daniel's chest until my voice gave out. I told him everything I'd swallowed for years, every comparison, every dismissal, every quiet message that said, "You matter less." He didn't rush me. He just held me. Then, softly, he said something that changed everything. "What if we don't wait for them?" I looked at, "What if we don't ask for permission?" he continued. "What if we choose us?" At first, the idea felt reckless, then liberating, then necessary. Why should our happiness be delayed to preserve someone else's spotlight? We didn't tell my family, and for the first time in my life, that secret didn't feel like shame. It felt like freedom. The closer Evelyn's wedding got, the smaller I seemed to become inside my own family. It wasn't intentional cruelty, at least not in the way people imagine it. No shouting, no outright insults, just an unspoken hierarchy that everyone understood and no one questioned. Evelyn at the center, the rest of us orbiting. My mother called daily now, sometimes twice. There were dress fittings, menu tastings, seating chart emergencies that somehow required my immediate attention. She spoke to me like I was staff, not her daughter. Efficient, expectant, impatient. "You need to stop by the florist today," she said one morning without preamble. "The blush roses aren't the right shade." I was already running late for work. "Mom, I can't," I said carefully. "I have patients scheduled." She sighed loudly, the way she did when she wanted me to feel selfish. "Your sister's wedding is once in a lifetime, Lillian. Some things are more important than work." I didn't argue. I rarely did. I just adjusted my schedule, swallowed the resentment, and went. What she didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that I was already married. Daniel and I planned everything quietly, methodically, almost reverently. We chose a small botanical garden outside the city, a place that smelled like eucalyptus and earth after rain. No grand aisle, no audience of acquaintances. Just the people who had shown up for us, without conditions. Daniel's parents cried when we told them, not out of shock, out of joy. His mother hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family," like it was the most natural thing in the world. The contrast nearly broke me. My dress wasn't expensive. Simple lines, soft fabric. When I put it on, I didn't feel like I was becoming someone else. I felt like I was finally allowed to be myself. The ceremony was short, personal. Daniel's uncle officiated. Our vows weren't polished, they were honest. Promises about partnership, about choosing each other, even when it wasn't easy. When Daniel slid the ring onto my finger, my hands shook. Not from doubt, from relief. Afterward, we had lunch at a small restaurant Daniel loved. The owner brought out champagne on the house and told us stories about Daniel as a child. We laughed, we ate too much. We took photos that captured real smiles instead of practiced ones. For a week afterward, we disappeared into a quiet honeymoon road trip. No luxury resorts, just national parks, cheap motels, and the kind of conversations you only have when you're not performing for anyone. It was perfect. And then we came home and chose silence. We agreed not to tell my family until after Evelyn's wedding. Not because we were ashamed, but because we didn't want to give them an excuse to blame us for anything that went wrong. I'd spent my life being the convenient scapegoat. I wasn't interested in playing that role again. I wore my wedding ring on a thin chain under my clothes. It felt strange at first, like hiding something precious, but also powerful, like carrying a secret that belonged only to me. As Evelyn's wedding week arrived, my mother transformed into something unrecognizable. She moved through the world like a general preparing for battle. Everyone was an obstacle or a resource, including me. 3 days before the wedding, she called me at dawn, nearly hysterical. "The florist messed up," she said. "You need to fix this." I looked across the kitchen at Daniel, who was making coffee before heading to the clinic. He raised an eyebrow as I mouthed, "Flower crisis." "Mom, I really can't today," I said. "I have work." "I'm too busy," she snapped. "Your sister is counting on you." Counting on me. I hung up and stared at the counter for a long moment. The irony settled heavy in my chest. I was someone's wife now. I had built something real. And yet here I was, being dispatched like an assistant. I went anyway. Evelyn's wedding day was everything my mother dreamed of. A luxury venue, crystal chandeliers, white flowers spilling from every surface, guests flown in from all over the country, many of whom barely knew the couple but mattered socially. I stood beside Evelyn as a bridesmaid, wearing a dress that cost more than my own wedding gown. She looked radiant, confident, untouched by doubt. I felt separate. During the ceremony, as she walked down the aisle, I couldn't help comparing it to my own. The grandeur, the spectacle, the audience. And then I remembered Daniel's voice shaking as he said my name. The way his hands held mine like I was something precious. I knew which one I'd choose again. At the reception, I was seated with distant relatives who spoke to me kindly but vaguely, like they didn't quite know what to do with me. "You're smart to take your time," one cousin said. "Marriage is a big step." I smiled and nodded, my wedding ring warm against my chest. When it was time for the bouquet toss, my stomach tightened. I almost skipped it, but my mother was already looking for me. "All the single ladies," the DJ called. Single. I joined reluctantly, standing toward the back. I didn't want attention. I didn't want the symbolism. I didn't want the jokes. The bouquet flew through the air and landed squarely in my hands. The room erupted. Someone shouted my name. Someone else laughed. My mother appeared at my side, flushed with wine and excitement. "Your sister's wedding was perfect," she said loudly. "When will it be your turn?" The room quieted. This was it. I felt Daniel's eyes on me from across the room. Steady, supportive. I reached into the hidden pocket I'd asked for in my dress, pulled out the ring, slipped it onto my finger. "It already happened," I said calmly. "You just weren't there." Silence fell like a held breath. Faces froze. Smiles faltered. "What?" my mother whispered. I held up my hand. "Daniel and I got married 2 months ago, quietly, with people who wanted to be there." Evelyn stared at me, stunned. My father's face darkened. Whispers spread. Phones came out. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking. I was standing, and I wasn't apologizing. For a moment after the words left my mouth, no one moved. It was as if the entire reception hall had frozen mid-breath, music still humming faintly from the speakers, champagne bubbles rising uselessly in half-raised glasses, smiles caught halfway between polite and confused. My mother was the first to recover. Her expression shifted rapidly, like someone cycling through channels they didn't want to land on. Confusion, shock, disbelief. Then something sharper. "You're joking," she said, her voice thin, almost pleading. "This isn't funny, Lillian." "I'm not joking," I replied. My own voice surprised me. It didn't shake. It didn't crack. It sounded finished, like I'd already crossed a line and wasn't interested in retreating. I turned slightly, enough for the light to catch the ring now resting openly on my finger. A simple band, no diamonds, no spectacle, just certainty. Daniel stepped closer, coming to stand beside me. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone was an answer. Evelyn finally found her voice. "You got married?" she asked, her brows knitting together. "Without telling us?" "Without telling you." The difference mattered. "Yes," I said, "we did." My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. His jaw was tight, his face flushed a deep, angry red. "You embarrass this family," he said flatly. The words landed exactly where they always had, on me. The convenient container for disappointment. I exhaled slowly. "No," I said. "I told the truth." Around us, the whispers had grown louder. Guests leaned toward one another. Phones were no longer subtle. I could almost see the story spreading in real time. Shock, speculation, judgment. For once, it didn't scare me. Evelyn looked stricken now, her perfect composure slipping. "Why would you do this here?" she asked. "On my wedding day." I met her gaze. Really met it. Not as the quieter sister, not as the afterthought. "When exactly should I have told you?" I asked calmly. "At your bridal shower? When Mom told everyone I wasn't ready for marriage? Or during one of the dozens of dinners where every conversation revolved around your plans and your timeline?" My mother shook her head, tears pooling. "We didn't mean it like that." "But you did it like that," I replied. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the clink of silverware being set down at a nearby table. "When I got engaged," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "Dad told me to wait. Not because I wasn't ready, but because we didn't want to steal Evelyn's thunder. When I mentioned wedding ideas, the subject changed. When I talked about Daniel, I was told to focus on myself." Daniel's hand slipped into mine, grounding, steady. "So we did," I finished. "We focused on ourselves." Someone behind us murmured something approving. I didn't look back, but I felt it. the subtle shift, the recognition. Not everyone was scandalized. Some were impressed. My father scoffed. "You're attention-seeking." I smiled sadly. "No," I said. "I'm done disappearing." That was when my mother broke down completely, reaching for my arm. "We would have come," she insisted. "If you'd told us, we would have been there." I gently removed my arm from her grasp. "Would you?" I asked softly. "Or would you have asked me to wait?" That question hung between us, unanswered. Daniel leaned in and whispered, "Are you ready?" I nodded. As we turned toward the exit, the room erupted into overlapping voices. Questions, accusations, commentary. Someone tried to stop us. Someone else called my name. I didn't turn back. The cool night air hit my face like relief when we stepped outside. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself together until that moment. Daniel unlocked the car and opened my door. Before getting in, I paused. "Do you regret it?" he asked gently. I thought about the stunned faces, the silence, the years of swallowing my truth. "No," I said. "I don't." The drive home was quiet, but not heavy, just thoughtful, processing. When we got inside our apartment, I finally took the chain from around my neck and slipped it off, setting it carefully on the counter. Then I looked down at my hand. The ring was exactly where it belonged. Daniel mirrored the motion, sliding his own ring into place. For the first time since our wedding, we looked like what we were. No hiding, no pretending. "No more secrets," I said. "No more," he agreed, pulling me into his arms. I slept deeply that night, exhausted but lighter. The aftermath arrived quickly. My phone buzzed nonstop for days. Texts from cousins, messages from extended family. Some supportive, some shocked, a few critical. The hardest messages came from my parents. My mother left long voicemails, crying apologies followed by sharp accusations. She couldn't seem to decide whether I'd hurt her or she'd failed me. Evelyn sent a series of increasingly hostile texts, accusing me of ruining her moment, of being selfish, of making everything about me. My father didn't call at all. Instead, he had my mother tell me he was deeply disappointed. That phrase had lost its power. There were other calls too. My aunt told me she was proud of me. A cousin admitted she'd always noticed the difference in how I was treated. Daniel's family welcomed me even more fiercely, horrified by what they'd witnessed. 3 weeks later, my parents asked to meet us. A neutral restaurant. Public. Controlled. My mother cried. My father remained stiff, insisting I could have handled things privately. Neither fully understood why I'd felt invisible. I didn't argue. 6 months later, things are different. Not perfect. Not healed, but clearer. Evelyn and I exist in an uneasy truce. Polite, distant, honest in a way we never were before. My parents try harder, sometimes. They still orbit Evelyn instinctively, but now they pause, notice. Daniel and I bought a small house with a garden. We host dinners for friends who feel like family. We're building traditions that don't rely on comparison or approval. Then I remember how quiet I'd already been for most of my life. The truth is, I don't regret the secret wedding. I don't regret the reveal either. After years of being the other daughter, I chose myself. And that, more than the shock, more than the drama, was the real turning point. The days after Evelyn's wedding felt strange. Not explosive, not dramatic in the way movies make family fallout look. There were no screaming matches, no doors slammed in slow motion, just distance. Silence that stretched, conversations that ended too quickly, relationships recalibrating without a clear roadmap. For a while, I checked my phone reflexively, expecting another message, another accusation, another demand that I explain myself again in a way that would finally make it make sense to them. But the messages slowed. And something unexpected happened. So did my need to respond. My mother still called more than she should have. Some days she sounded remorseful, talking about how she never realized how sidelined I'd felt. Other days, there was an edge to her voice, a subtle implication that I had overreacted. "I just wish you hadn't done it like that," she said once, in front of everyone. I didn't argue anymore. "I did what I needed to do," I replied. "That's all I can say." My father remained distant. When we spoke, he was polite, restrained, almost formal. He never apologized. He never acknowledged the imbalance I'd lived with for years. To him, the problem was never the pattern. It was the disruption. Evelyn and I didn't talk for months. When we finally did, it was brief, awkward, careful. She admitted she hadn't noticed how often our parents centered her. Not because she was malicious, but because it had always been normal, comfortable, beneficial. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said. "I know," I answered. And for the first time, it wasn't an accusation, just a statement. Daniel watched all of this quietly. He never pushed me toward reconciliation or distance. He followed my lead, reminding me, gently, that boundaries weren't punishments. They were clarity. We built a life that didn't revolve around managing anyone else's expectations. Our house wasn't big, but it was warm. We planted herbs in the backyard, hosted dinners where laughter came easily, celebrated holidays with friends who didn't ask us to shrink ourselves to fit tradition. I stopped wearing my ring like something fragile. It stayed on my finger, visible, solid, unapologetic. Sometimes people ask if I regret how everything unfolded, if I wish I'd waited, if I should have kept the peace. I think about that a lot, about all the years I stayed quiet to avoid discomfort, about how much of myself I folded down to fit into my family's version of harmony. And I realized something important. Peace that requires silence isn't peace. It's compliance. The truth is, revealing my marriage wasn't about revenge. It just looked like that from the outside. It was about claiming space, about choosing a life where love didn't come with conditions, where I wasn't ranked or compared or postponed. Daniel and I talk about the future often. Kids, maybe. A life where they grow up knowing they're valued without having to compete for it. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay that moment. The bouquet in my hands, my mother's question, the quiet right before I spoke. Not because I'm reliving the shock, but because that was the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist fully. My family and I are working on it. Some relationships heal slowly. Some just change shape. What matters is this. I no longer measure my worth by their approval. My wedding ring isn't flashy. It doesn't sparkle the way Evelyn's did under crystal chandeliers, but it represents something far more lasting. A marriage built on choice, a life built on honesty, and the understanding that I was never less than. I was just waiting for the moment I decided to stop playing a role that was never written for me.